Welcome to Executive Access, created for motivated professionals. This is your home for real talk with executives about their career journeys, leadership practices, successes, and learnings along the way. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. Today, we are joined by Rachel Lee, Senior Sales Professional at Hex. Rachel's a little bit earlier in career than most of my guests, but I think that she has such incredible things to share around leadership. Her point of view is absolutely amazing. Senior leaders will be reminded of the impact they have and be able to reflect on how they should show up for their teams. Rachel talks about how she was able to significantly differentiate herself early in career at Microsoft. She talked about how she learned to use her voice as she grew. And she gives some tips for leaders to think about as they work on retaining top talent. Rachel also talked about the power of encouragement, something I can attest to, as Rachel was one of the first people to encourage me to do this podcast. Let's dive in. Rachel Lee, welcome to Executive Access. I am so happy to be with you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. You're in sunny California, which is great, or maybe not so sunny today in San Francisco.
Today is 70 and sunny, which is very rare. Usually it's temperate and cloudy all year long. So I'm excited to get outside later today.
Save that for me. I'm coming to San Francisco in a couple of months, and I want it to be just like that.
I'll manifest the great weather for you.
Excellent. Well, Rachel, you are a technology sales leader currently at Hex, which is a data and analytics platform company. You were also an account exec at Salesforce.com, and you started your career at Microsoft right out of college, grew and were promoted into several different positions where I met you. So already, just a really great career with a lot of great experiences. When I met you, it was such a reminder that even early in your career, when you were right out of college, there were such great leadership skills in you that I certainly didn't develop until later. And it's such a reminder that leadership is so much more than just about, leading people. It's about influencing and all of those things. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. Maybe the old growth mindset question. What have you been working on, or what are you doing to learn and grow these days?
Yeah, I'm going to take that in twofold, maybe both in my personal and professional life. I live in California, so I get all these activities in my backyard. I'm trying to take up surfing as an adult, which is very humbling because I'm really terrible. And it's rather stressful to be so bad at something, but it is a lot of fun just getting out in the water, and learning a new skill is always just an exciting way to challenge yourself. And then professionally, so I'm part of a small sales team at Hex, which is a startup. And with that, I don't have the backing of Microsoft or Salesforce to, get us into the door, or people aren't coming already knowing where we fit into their tech stack. So our whole team, we're really focused on like really thoughtful discovery with aspects of just deeper level questions, challenging the customer a little bit. It's a totally different motion than I'm used to. And it's just a good reminder that even with 9 years of selling, there's little bits of the sales process that I can always work on. So I'm trying to do a little bit more almost uncomfortable discovery in my sales calls. So that's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Just getting a little bit better every day. Well, I too started surfing as an adult. It is humbling, but exhilarating. And I'm just going to say, you're not a great surfer yet, but you will be if you stick with it. And you're super athletic, so I'm sure you're already doing great. Certainly way better than I did.
Yes, hopefully in the next 5 years I'll get there, but it's a fun activity.
That's great. Well, I thought it would be fun to share how we first met. I was a leader at Microsoft, and you were interviewing for a position on the team that I led. And I just remember immediately being so engaged, like, wow, she is just the way you carried yourself, the preparation you did, the energy you brought. And within 5 minutes, I thought, I have to have her on this team. She will bring such great thought leadership, such great energy. So it was a really fun day. I think we met like this over Zoom, or actually it was over Teams at the time when we were at Microsoft.
Yeah, and that whole experience crystal clear for me too. I remember being so nervous because I think at that point I was maybe like 23, 24. Like my first interview process after interviewing in college for roles, and so nervous to meet you because, you know, you're my skip level and influential in the decision and just very intimidated. But then you turned on the screen and you were in, I don't know if you remember this, like athletic clothing and a headband. And you're like, hey, baby,
Oh, no.
sorry I'm dressed like this, but I'm training for a half marathon. Like my kids and my husband and I, like we do this at Disney World every year. Anyways, like I had to squeeze in a quick run, like let's get started. And that wall that is built up of like intimidation immediately melted. I'm like, oh, she's human. Like she also likes to run and she has a family and she's not a robot and I can be myself. And I feel like it just allowed me to show up authentically without nerves in that interview process where we like really connected in that interview. And it was genuinely because you came in and we're just like, hey, I'm a person, so let's just have a good conversation.
I'm so glad you remember it that way because I do remember that. I actually considered not turning on my camera. I was trying to be healthy and balanced, 3 young kids and getting healthy and doing these things. And so I had to sneak in or run whenever I could get it. And back then, Microsoft, we weren't using cameras a lot, but in the last moment, I was like, you know what? We need to be able to see each other and really assess whether this is a good bi-directional move for Rachel and for our team. So, wow, I'm glad I turned my camera on, even though I'm glad that I don't look like that right now. Thanks, Rachel, for sharing that. Well, there's a few things that I'm so excited to explore with you. We'll go in any direction that this naturally goes, but I definitely want to start with, your rapid sort of differentiated success at Microsoft. You came in, it was your first position out of college, you were super early in career, and yet you were able to differentiate yourself and to make a name for yourself so quickly. And I definitely feel that our early in career listeners will gain a lot of value about how you did that, which I'm about to ask. But also, I think it's good for our mid to senior level leaders also to get reconnected with what that was like for you. So if you don't mind going way back to right after college, it was sort of extraordinary what you did. And I'm just so curious, how did you do that?
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 things that stick out. First, it is really just like putting your head down and excelling in your craft. And I feel like I came in super hungry, put into a field position, knew literally nothing. And I'm very grateful for someone taking that risk on me. And I was like, let me shadow every meeting possible, reading like every sales book I could get my hands on. And at that point, it was really just like, how can I be the best at this job and really execute before I even think about anything else? So that was like the first part, is like actually excelling in the role and doing everything you can. And that's obviously kind of a no-brainer. But I think what actually kind of helped me stand out was I wanted to be really great at sales, but also take into consideration what my leadership cared about. I'm sure you remember this. As a leader, Microsoft had different initiatives every year that they were hyper focused on. And one year it was partnerships and having partners run all our statements of work. And that was a huge focus. And so for me, I heard that. And basically any customer that wanted services or statement of work, I threw a partner in there. And it was a non-negotiable. And by the end of the year, I had like 4 or 5x the amount of partners involved versus my peers. And my peer might have hit 200% attainment with 0 partners. I might be at a lower attainment with all these incredible partners involved. And that was what leaders wanted to highlight. And so I think early on, I wanted to know like what is success outside of just hitting a number, like what matters to my leadership. And once I heard that, I like ran towards those kind of side projects or different ways to stand out.
Oh, fantastic. So, the hard work and then the outward mindset of thinking about others, in this case, the company and your leaders, and sort of mapping your activities to that. Well, I think you did such a great job of that because, I remember very early on, we were at a huge sales conference with partners and who was highlighted on stage, right, with our corporate vice president, Rachel Lee. So kudos to you on that. When you also thinking back to that time in your career, what did you notice about the leaders that were above you, right? The leaders you were working for or others? How were you thinking about, successes or things maybe that you were like, I'm not sure about that. And how did they impact how you brought forward your leadership?
Yeah. I like three things come to mind, and I definitely want your feedback on each one. The first was it's a lot to do with working under your leadership. Is there like people can tell when leaders are being genuine and authentic when it comes to being vulnerable. And I feel like at Microsoft, with so many layers of leadership up to Satya at the time, there were some leaders who met me multiple times and asked my name every time and knew nothing about me. And only time they really cared to converse with me was understanding where a deal was in a deal cycle or talking about just very business oriented things, versus other leaders like yourself who like they lead with questions of like, tell me about your family. What do you like to do outside of work? Like, what are you working on? How can I be helpful? How can I support you and coach you? And when you feel that authentic connection with the leader, like, oh, they want me to be successful and they are easy to connect with, you automatically just want to work harder to provide success for them and just gain their respect. It's just like a mutual kind of two-way street of caring for people you're managing and those people wanting to work hard and deliver for the team. And so like a story that comes to mind working under you, like I had a really great teammate, Jay Lockwood, who was a top performer, like consistently hitting like 200% attainment. And he was living in New York at the time and wanted to move down to Atlanta to be with his family in a long distance relationship. And it would have benefited you as a leader to keep him in your org because he's a top performer. But instead, I remember you were like actively helping him find jobs outside of your team and advocating for him. And I remember he told me you told him that like when you're sitting on a beach one day, you want to look back and feel like you did the right thing for people you managed. And this didn't impact my life at all, but just seeing how you advocated for him, I was like, she'll do the same for me. Like she has my back. Like I'm going to work really hard to continue building that relationship and trust. And he did leave the team, but he did do great things. And at the end of the day, he will always remember that, you know?
Wow. Thank you for telling that story. And I do remember Jay, and I hope he's listening. And you're right. It would have been way better for me if he stayed, but way better for him. So gosh, thank you for sharing that, Rachel. I appreciate that. So it's about, Dave Willis was on a few weeks ago, former CVP of Microsoft, and he said he proactively focused. You have to get to know your team. You have to want to do that. So hearing it from the other side about that's absolutely right for leaders of all levels to think about the impact that you have with your team and the power and the value of getting to know people. Plus, it just feels good, right? We spend so much time at work. We better get to know one another.
Exactly. Another thing that comes to mind, especially for early in career, is just like positive reinforcement. Like when you're in your early 20s and you don't know what's right or wrong, up or down, and you're just trying your best to show up and do the right thing. And my first kind of GM that I work for at Microsoft, Jamie Harper, who's gone on to be very successful at Microsoft. He immediately took me under his wing the moment I started and went on a couple of my first customer on-sites. And after every meeting, he would say something positive, like, you ran that meeting really well, or I really liked what you said here, or I really appreciate your ideas here, like, tell me more. And it instilled such a sense of confidence in me that I, at that age, like, wouldn't have been able to find on my own. Like, I needed kind of the just the small wins, right, along the way to start building that muscle of then speaking up and finding my voice and things like that. And without him, I think it would have taken me like a couple more years maybe to get that level of confidence in my role. And I just think leaders, like, when they see something good or they see potential, they should always say something rather than keep it in their head. Because like those small nuggets can be so impactful to people early in their career. It might seem like a one-off comment to the leader, but like I held on to those little things, like those kept me moving forward, you know? So that was very impactful for me early on.
Wow, that is amazing advice, because I think as you grow in your career and you become, more of a senior leader, you forget what it was like to be brand new. And I'm sure you're already forgetting a little bit of that, Rachel, as you're growing your career. So thanks for that reminder. I think for leaders to encourage everybody, but especially those early in their career with that experience, is great advice.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that comes to mind is just communicating what success looks like and providing clarity. And I think it's so easy when you're in a sales org or you're an individual contributor to constantly be pulled into multiple directions depending where the company is shifting their focus. And a lot of the time, like, so you're not sure what success means to a leader. They might have in their head, success actually means, yes, hitting your number, but also like XYZ things. And unless that's communicated to the team, they may fall short and they don't know why. And I think the best leaders I had, it was just crystal clear. You and I both worked with Dave. Dave Romboli was an amazing manager for me, especially at that time in my life, because he was just so blunt and was so crystal clear. Like, I need you to do this by this date. This is what's important to us. I'm going to keep all the noise out that isn't going to help you be better at your job. And like our one-on-ones were so intimidating in the beginning because they were like 10 minutes long maybe, and just like drilling down on like, what do we need to do? How do we need to execute? This is what's important. But I never left a meeting with him wondering like, what do I need to accomplish? Or like, what is he thinking? Or how do I impress him? He just laid it out every single time. And it just provided such clarity and focus. And I feel like when people have that focus and direction on which way to run, like they will sprint. And so that definitely comes to mind as a great quality that I hope to embody as well.
Dave Romboli's name has come up a couple times so far in my podcast. I think I might need to have him come on. But what a great segue, because creating clarity is actually one of Microsoft's management principles. And I think that is the key to so many things, and such a good reminder for leaders to make sure that everything is crystal clear for those they manage, right? So I appreciate you talking about that, and everything you've talked about around how you differentiated your success at Microsoft is going to help a lot of people that are maybe early in career and just getting started. And I hope that for our more senior leaders, you're tapping back into and remembering, and you're going to be able to use some of these principles to adjust your leadership style for, all types of people in your organization. So thanks for that, Rachel. That was a good reminder for me. Executive Access is brought to you by The Ideal Life. The Ideal Life offers a multimedia platform that is focused on cultivating a growth mindset. Here you'll find a supportive community, valuable content, and transformative coaching aimed at helping you live a more gratifying and joyful life. Ready to take the next step in your personal growth journey? Visit theideallife.com to explore their wealth of resources and join their vibrant, growing community today. The other area I'm so curious about your leadership is I watched you grow so much in terms of how you learn to use your voice. And the reason why I wanted to ask you about this is the people that I coach, being able to find their voice, use their voice effectively is a recurring theme that a lot of leaders at all levels actually struggle with and are working on. And you really did that well. You were able to find your voice. And I'm so curious, how are you able to grow in this way?
Yeah, I think the first stage, again, speaking to more younger in career, is just building that confidence, being really great at your role, understanding the value you're bringing to your team. And then the second phase I really entered, again, due to the positive reinforcement from leadership, as I mentioned, and talking about Dave again, like the best thing he told me was, you need to help me advocate for you, because I was a very much like, my actions will speak for themselves and I don't want to come off arrogant, and people will see I'm doing great work and it'll naturally, like, great things will happen. And some of that is true, but he was like, there's not a camera watching you work all day. Like, I only know what you tell me. So you need to tell me the great things you're doing so I can tell other people, or else, like, you're doing it siloed and no one's going to know. And so when I kind of reframed that in my head of, this isn't me bragging or like asking for a million things. This is just me sharing my work and my ideas, hopefully to help team members in the organization, and also just advocate for myself. Like, this is the great work that I have the potential to do. And from there, it was just like a muscle of like continuing to always speak up and advocate for myself. And I think at big companies, like, it's something someone also once told me was like, you might not get a promotion unless you ask for it, because there might be only 5 that year and there's already 10 people asking for it. It's very easy to pass on the person who never asked for it. And so it's getting comfortable with, hey, this is my goal. What are my gaps? How do I get there? And I remember the year that, like, I was working under you and got to go to Gold Club. It was because I got feedback that, hey, like, if you want to go, you should write out a whole proposal of why you deserve to go and give it to Dave. And I did just that and got to go. And so it's kind of like learning different ways to advocate for yourself, and having the tough conversations with your leadership on like what you think your worth and value could be in the gaps that they see.
Excellent. I said this on a previous episode that, we often worry about stepping on people's toes, or we worry about coming across arrogant. And generally speaking, if you're having those thoughts, it just means that you're self-aware. And so the likelihood that you would cross the line into overdoing it and being those things is very, very low when you think about it. And especially when you pair that with earning it. You've earned it. You've done the hard work. You've delivered results, or, sort of the humble way of saying, well, if it's not yet, then what do I need to work on, as you talked about? I think that's great advice you got. And it was fun to see you advocate for yourself, to advocate for Gold Club, which is like the biggest, one of the biggest awards that a salesperson can win at Microsoft. Advocate for a work style difference when you wanted to move to San Francisco, and to say, hey, can I do my job from here, and all of those things. So phenomenal to see. And what about using your voice in other ways? So I have this idea that I share with some of my clients. When I was early in career, I didn't think that my view was that important. Like, what am I going to say to an executive that comes to town? They know more than me. But then when I became an executive, I realized how much I craved that ground floor view because my day to day did not enable me to have those things. And the analogy I use is, an executive is sitting at the 40th floor of a skyscraper and you're in the same building, but you're on the second floor. And, an earlier and maybe a middle manager is, on the 20th floor, and everybody's views are important. They just see different things. Lower floors can see the zeitgeist of what's happening, the excitement in people's faces or what the weather's like. And the high floors, they can't see any of that, but they can see the strategy, really far. And so your voice at every different level is powerful if you understand that it's powerful and that you use it to connect the dots. And I'm curious if that analogy makes sense to you, or whether you were how you think about using your voice from a business perspective, speaking up and bringing value to the organization.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and tell this a lot to other folks starting out in sales, and like, it is such a incredible position at a company because you are getting feedback from the customer on a daily basis. Like, you are understanding what messaging is landing, what the product roadmap requests are, what's breaking, what got them on the phone, like all incredible feedback for product, for marketing. And it is extremely valuable. And I agree, great leaders, they want that pulse check constantly so they could bring it up the chain. I feel this very specifically working at a startup, which is so awesome because it is a very small team. So I sit next to an engineer across from a PM. Like, I get to tell them directly, like, hey, I just got off a call with a customer. This has come up in my past 5 calls. Like, we really need to prioritize on this roadmap item, and it'll happen. It's like the most incredible thing for me after coming from big companies, but it is invaluable knowledge, and knowing that like your observations can better the company and the product, and that like having that mindset when giving feedback, like the worst thing that can happen is they hear the feedback and nothing's actioned on it, but at least you gave it. And I think it's very important for people to feel empowered to do so.
Excellent. And have you taken any of those kind of bottoms up lessons with you as you continue to grow and expand your responsibilities in your career and how you engage with others?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is continuing to have a voice, whether it's bottom up, top down, of maintaining like extreme transparency and honesty. I feel like silence doesn't help anyone in most situations, whether it's enhancing your career or giving product feedback. And I also think, like we've talked about this in the past, of there's a fine balance too, right? Of that voice, and there's times where you want to use the voice for everything. And in my current role, I definitely I pick my battles of like, where can I use my voice and help with the solution, and not just give feedback to give it. It's more like what is effective feedback, what are areas where my voice can actually influence and help versus be noise, and like kind of be able to read situations of using that. Because I feel like now I've been very comfortable using my voice, but then now there's a scale, right? Which we've talked about before.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's great. Great job, Rachel. I want to shift a little bit and see if I can get you to talk a little bit about your career journey, because one thing that I admired about you is your desire and your willingness to take a risk and to make a change in your career. So we were both at Microsoft. It's an amazing place, amazing leaders. You were doing great, winning awards, getting promoted. But I think I'll frame it as, if I get this right, maybe the pace at which Microsoft saw you moving through the organization was not as fast as the pace that you desired for yourself, right? And so at some point you said, you know what, it might be time for me to move on. And I'm curious about how you made that decision, because on one hand, you could stay and continue to do great and continue to advance your career. On the other hand, you could decide to leave, go into the unknown, take a risk, and move forward. So how have you thought about that?
Yeah. I same boat as you, loved my time at Microsoft. Like I would never take it back for the world. It built such a strong foundation for me, incredible mentors, networks, and like taught me to be a really great seller in those couple of years. But yeah, I think after a few roles at Microsoft, like I was just so hungry for a new challenge. And at that stage, at that company, I felt like the only way to grow or be challenged was in a management or leadership role. And I really wanted to kind of coach others and start building those skills. And I had a lot of really great sponsors like yourself, and a lot of folks were super supportive of it. But a lot of the conversations I had, the feedback kept being, you need more experience. And it ranged from like, you should go into the dynamics role because it's a new technology, so you'll learn how to speak that. Or you should go into sales excellence, so you know strategy and forecasting. Or you should go into partnerships because it's a whole new organization. And but the overlaying theme was just like, you need another role, or like wait 2 more years. But there wasn't much actual feedback on why that was, other than time. And for me, it just didn't sit well. Of if I sit in another sales role for 2 or 3 years and then get the opportunity, am I actually getting the best new experience? Or am I actually growing to my full potential in this role? And so I took it to heart of like, hey, you need more experience and different experiences, and felt like moving to another company was the way to actually get the most experience. And so I moved over to Salesforce, and I had never sold something like a CRM system before. And it was great. I mean, they have such a different selling culture than Microsoft, like much more aggressive and prescriptive. It's very sales first versus maybe technology first at Microsoft. And I did learn a ton. But even after 6 or 7 months there, I felt like I was back into my regular ginormous corporate sales motion, and still wasn't growing in the ways I wanted it to. And so I took a hard pivot and joined at that point, like a 40-person startup in hopes of having a totally different experience. And it's been extremely wonderful. And I've learned more in the past 2 years, I think, than the multiple before that.
Well, and what you've shared with me about just the many different hats you get to wear at Hex, and how you're doing things that you might not even be doing as a general manager at Microsoft, given the way we segment things, is really great experience. But if I were to pull you back to Microsoft, because from the point of view of the company, we had a high performing person, really great, great for the company. What would have made you stay?
Yeah, no, I think about that often. I'm like, regardless, because there's always that path of like, I'm sure if I had stayed at this point in my life, I may be managing a team, and it would have been a similar path of staying at Microsoft. But for me, again, the multiple different people I spoke to kept saying experience, and the undertone of it, like no one said it outwardly, was very much like, you're too young. Like, look around you. Like, all the managers are in their 40s, and people have been here for 15 years before they manage. And no one actually had that hard conversation with me of, hey, you're perceived as young. You came out of college. People know that. So I'm sorry, that's what it is. But rather they would always lean toward a new experience. And I think if someone was more prescriptive with me, and they're like, hey, you need more executive presence so you don't come off as young, maybe this role will help you get there. Hey, I really think you should take on this specific role because I see a gap here and that's going to fill it to make you a really great manager. And I just think I lacked that constructive direction and criticism where it felt more like time was the only answer versus when I would dig deeper for actual areas I could work on. So I do think if a leader sat me down and was like, hey, these are your gaps. These are the roles that can fill them. Here are your options. I would have been more inclined to feel like I was progressing towards something.
I think that's great. It comes back to clarity, I'm hearing again. And again, I wanted you to tell the story because it's such a great reminder for senior leaders. I was guilty of this. I remember when I was a general manager at Microsoft, we hired some college hires. And I remember at first, I hate to say it, but like not loving the idea of it because that meant I couldn't hire one extra really experienced person. And we'd bring the college hires in and I'd say, okay, well, what are we going to do with these people that don't have any experience? And we unfortunately sidelined them way too long until one of them was brave enough to say to me, you know, Jamie, I think we can be doing more. And he was right. I said, what do you think you can be doing? And you know what he said? He said, you know, I noticed you don't post at all on LinkedIn. You have no social presence. I can help you with that. And I said, I bet you can, because I'm really intimidated by that. It gave me a new perspective. And I think that that's really important. And, you know, I don't know if this was true in your case, but I'm just kind of brainstorming now. If the idea was, you know, you just need more time, maybe what would have been more helpful is for someone to tell you the observable thing that was holding you back. Was it executive presence as a competency or confidence, and to give clarity around the path? I have a client now that I'm working with that we had a couple people like Jay Lockwood, right, that were just moving on for various wonderful things in their lives, and also some high performing people that have moved on to other things. And sort of the trend was that, you know, I just didn't see the path. And so I think for leaders to think about, for the people they want to retain, helping them understand what the path is, even if the path is a little longer and slower than what they would desire, they need to hear that. And what I'm hearing you say is, if you had known the path, you might have said, okay, it's a little slower than I want, but that makes sense. And I want to hang in there.
Yeah, no, that's
not to say that the path. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying that was spot on. I think I just lacked that direction. And my fear was, after I do this next role, the answer will be one more, like then 2 more years. And it felt like I think I wanted to take more control of my career and my future versus kind of waiting without much direction. And so that is something I hope to remember as I move on in my career, is just, like you said, clarity and direction, and just very honest feedback is the best thing you can do for people looking to progress.
And, you know, one other thing that I'm wondering about is, for the person that doesn't feel like they're getting clarity, ask for it. A great way to do that would be to say, what is the thing you're observing about me that leads you to the conclusion that I'm not quite ready to be a manager yet? You know, get them to name that thing. So, well, thank you so much for sharing that, Rachel. I appreciate you being humble and bold to share that. But make no mistake, the path you have chosen has been amazing, and the skills you've put into your toolkit's getting pretty heavy there. So I can't wait to see what you do next. You know, in closing, there's one question that I have been asking everybody that comes on the podcast, and it's this: if you could give one piece of advice about being a leader, what would that be?
Yeah, and I think for me, and it's very fun to come on this podcast and be a different point of view, because at my current company, like I am not in a leadership role. There aren't titles. I'm just working with the team to hopefully build Hex into a wonderful company one day. And for me, I felt like I used to think titles or promotions were the only way to progress my career. And now working at a small company without a title, I'm the most fulfilled I've ever been. And it's because I'm getting the opportunity to problem solve, the opportunity to explore different skill sets, wearing the multiple hats. Like, I just feel like I'm making way more of an impact than I did in my previous roles. And at the end of the day, I think if you continue to chase experiences that challenge you and help you grow, the titles and the leadership opportunities will come. That's inevitable. And rather than trying to back your way into it, I think just continuing to always take the opportunities that will force growth and bring more experiences. Like, I think I will be such a better leader one day because I had jumped to Salesforce and I'm at a startup than if I had just stayed at one company. And it's just due to the diversity of experience and knowing I can take on different challenges. And so my advice would be to chase experiences, chase things that never feel like you have to take a role that you don't think you'll grow in, and things will work out in the future.
Chase experiences. I love that, Rachel. And you are proof positive that leadership is so much more than managing people, right? You have been a leader since day one when I met you all those years ago when you were straight out of college. I have no doubt that you're leading EdHex and helping them become a great company. So thank you so much for coming on today. I can't wait to see you hopefully one day in person. And I appreciate you so much.
It was great catching up. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please join us every Tuesday as we continue to bring you insider access to executive leadership.